Well, last week, much of the world's social media was dominated by a video, I'm sure you saw it, of Astronomer CEO Andy Byron and his head of HR getting caught on a kiss cam at a Coldplay concert in Boston. In a matter of just a few hours, that clip of the couple trying but failing to duck out of the spotlight was everywhere. Well, since then, the CEO, who is married with children, has resigned. The chief people officer, Kristin Cabot, is now on leave from Astronomer, but the fallout from that viral video has certainly generated a lot more talk about things like ethics, accountability, and the repercussions that conflicts of interest among leadership can cause. We're going to talk about that now with consultant Nick Kinley, who joins me from London. Nick, your new book is coming out next month. It's called The Power Trap: How Leadership Changes People and What to Do About It. So you're well placed to talk about all of this. Thank you so much for joining us on France 24.
Thanks very much for having me on.
All right, Nick, this might be perhaps the most exposed act of an alleged affair linked to a person in power that we've seen, but it's definitely far from the first one we've seen. Why do so many leaders seem to get caught up in situations like this?
Well, every leadership role, it's all about power. Every leadership role contains an element of power, and every leader is affected by the power that they hold. And we know that power does two things to us in particular. So first of all, power makes us more disinhibited. So we become more driven by what's inside us, more likely to act on what we truly think and feel. And some of the consequences of this are harmless. We know that power holders are more likely to smile if they're feeling happy. They tend to laugh louder than those without power. But they're also more likely to express negative emotions, and no matter what they're feeling, their decision-making is more likely to be influenced by their emotions. And that means that they're more likely to be led by what they want, they're more likely to prioritize personal goals, and they're more likely to be influenced by their desires and passions. Now, that's the first thing. The second thing is that we know that power makes people more likely to take risks, and that's both in work and out of work. Now, in work, that can be good. We know that powerful CEOs are more likely to pursue innovative products. They're more likely to pursue M&A. They're more likely to pursue risk-taking strategies that deliver greater value for their organizations. Out of work, we know they're also likely to pursue more risky behavior. There's some fun studies showing that leaders who feel more powerful are more likely to draw a card in a game of blackjack. But it also means that leaders who feel more powerful are more likely, when we know as well that they're more likely to be disinhibited, to engage in unprotected sex, and yes, to engage in acts of infidelity. And this is true for both men and women. So leaders of both genders are affected. And that's why we see these stories again and again and again. It's why we see it in celebrities. It's why we see it in CEOs. And it's why one of the biggest stories in the world at the moment is people in the US looking for the truth about sex parties for the rich and famous.
Absolutely. We certainly saw that with what was happening in New York with the P. Diddy trial. What about on the flip side? I mean, why do you think people are attracted to power? I mean, some might argue that when you have so many people, for example, throwing themselves at someone because they are in power, it just might be easier for the person in power to say yes.
Yeah. There's no doubt about it that when you've got power, it makes certain things easier for you, right? It certainly throws open options to you that you probably don't have when you're not powerful. And that's why we've got this old phrase out there that power corrupts, because it makes behavior easier. So certain types of behavior that we might see as inappropriate, easier to do, right? So it becomes easier to take money. It becomes easier to engage in acts of infidelity if people are throwing at you, right? You're more likely to be bribed if you can give someone something. If you've got power, you are more likely to appear attractive to someone if you have power. There's lots of studies out there showing that. And so hence we've got this idea that power corrupts. But I don't really believe that, right? Because there's plenty of people who have power who don't fall to this type of of a behavior. So I think actually every time that we say power corrupts, we're actually almost excusing people who behave badly.
Nick, I'm sorry to jump in just very briefly before you go, because our time is short. I mean, just one ethical question.
Sure.
There are some people in some cultures, for example, here in France, who might argue that perhaps it's not a company's business what its employees do when they're not working. What do you have to say to that in just 30 seconds?
Sure. I can understand that. But if you see someone that is being influenced by their power, right? So if power is leading them to behave in this way, it is highly unlikely that they are just making this one bad decision. It is likely that power is leading them to make a whole raft of bad decisions. So it is the business's business, because if they're making this bad decision to go and behave like this outside of work, they're probably making a whole host of bad decisions inside work as well.
Nick, thank you so much. Well said. Nick Kinley, your new book is The Power Trap, How Leadership Changes People and What to Do About It. Comes out next month. Thanks so much for your time.